Today on Hearts of Heroes, a critical medical procedure in the middle of a horrific winter storm.
If anything is delayed, it could be catastrophic for that patient.
With roads closed, it will require a daring rescue by air.
We were put on red alert that we may have a situation.
Plus, a woman and child trapped in their car, the water rising around them in the midst of a flash flood.
It was the most scariest situation I had ever been in my entire life.
Thankfully, heroes were on the move. We all know it's a nurse's job to save lives. One nurse, however, went the extra mile when he agreed to donate life-saving bone marrow to a leukemia patient in need.
But an historic winter storm hit the state of Texas, and then it would take a whole nother group of heroes to make sure that that nurse got to the hospital on time so they could fulfill that promise.
With a population of 1.5 million, San Antonio, Texas is both modern and historic. Here you'll find a bustling city surrounding distinctive landmarks like the Alamo and the San Antonio Riverwalk.
San Antonio is an awesome town. There's so much diversity here. You can come and get some great Mexican food. It's awesome. The weather is usually great. Just love it here.
San Antonio is also home to the South Texas Blood and Tissue Center. The center specializes in blood, tissue, marrow, and stem cell donation. And they work hand in hand with a national blood and tissue registry called Be the Match.
Be the Match is a nonprofit organization that works with patients that have severe blood cancer or blood disorder like leukemia or lymphoma and helps these patients by finding their life-saving donors.
Potential donors register their DNA with Be the Match, and if they do match up, they're called to donate marrow or stem cells to people who need a transplant. But finding a match is not always easy.
What you are looking for is kind of your genetic twin somewhere out in the world.
Registered nurse Rodolfo Aguilar had been on the registry for 6 years, when suddenly the phone rang. He was a match for a young girl who needed an emergency stem cell transplant.
They call me, hey, you are probably the best match for this little patient.
Because of the girl's critical condition, the transplant could not wait another moment.
Rodolfo's request was urgent, and we had just a few days.
In order to donate, though, Rodolfo had to be put on a special medication called filgrastim.
They get 5 days of injections. On the 5th day is collection day. That medication stimulates their bone marrow to start making their stem cells, which can be pushed out into the bloodstream, and that's how we are able to collect it.
Once the process is complete, they only have 36 hours to get the stem cells out of Rodolfo, so the donation must go on without a hitch. You know, a hitch, like an historic winter storm.
It was not till the day before his donation that the winter storm reared its head and we were put on red alert that we may have a situation.
The February 2021 storm covered Texas with snow and ice, knocked out power to millions, and crippled much of the state. Traveling by car was nearly impossible, and Rodolfo lived 130 miles away.
I got on the phone with Rodolfo pretty immediately and told him to stay put until we had a plan in place.
But they had to move quickly. A little girl's life was on the line.
We knew that a delay of more than 36 hours would mean an actual delay of at least 1.5 to 2 weeks because we would have to start this whole process over again.
If anything is delayed, it could be catastrophic for that patient. So we had to continue on no matter what.
Coming up, with roads iced over, the team is left with few options.
They told me, hey, so if it went down, so having to take a helicopter ride, are you willing to do that?
But first, this safety tip.
It's unfortunate, but natural disasters can be extremely devastating, not just physically, but emotionally as well.
It may be difficult if you find yourself in a tragic or trying situation. Try not to neglect your own personal needs or the needs of those around you. Everyone experiences tragedy differently, so be a pillar of strength.
Your health and that of those around you is of paramount importance. So be strong and focus on the here and now. You won't regret it, and neither will those depending on you.
In February of 2021, a powerful winter storm hit Texas. Much of the state was paralyzed by snow, ice, and sub-freezing temperatures that shut down power sources for tens of millions of people. Nurse Rodolfo Aguilar was scheduled to make an emergency stem cell donation when the storm hit. Now they had to find some way to safely get Rodolfo to the Blood and Tissue Center in the middle of the storm. They had to. A little girl's life was on the line. Samuel Hillhouse assembled a team and started brainstorming solutions.
That team reached out to me and gave me the options: military escort, DPS escort, helicopter, and I in turn reached out to Rodolfo.
They told me, hey, so if it went down to having to take a helicopter ride, are you willing to do that? I'm like, we'll do it.
But the question now, where would they find a helicopter? With the clock ticking, Samuel's team called Fairlifts, who contacted Derek Smith of Veracity Aviation.
We knew the urgency of what Fairlifts was putting out to us, that it needed to be done, and it was going to be a high priority.
But they didn't know if they could fly either because of the storm.
The reason you wouldn't fly into any visible moisture whenever your temperature's close to 32 degrees or 0 degrees Celsius is that ice will start to form on the rotor blades and also on your windshield. And so once that does, then you're going to lose lift, and then you're going to be in the dirt pretty quick.
Samuel's team had to plan to fly and assess the morning of. They told Rodolfo to get to the airport the next morning. All they could do was hope the weather wouldn't interfere with the flight.
It wasn't as stormy as it was the previous day, but everything was frozen. It was a little bit scary because my car would move around with the icy roads, but I made it all the way to the little airport that we have here.
When Rodolfo got there, pilot Derek Smith was waiting for him. They jumped in the helicopter and headed for San Antonio.
Can't say I was too scared to fly, but I had never been in one of those before. I would say I was more excited than nervous.
While the helicopter was in the air, our team was able to make outreach with the Texas A&M Forestry Service, who told us that they would have their chief pick up Rodolfo and personally transport him to the South Texas Blood and Tissue Center.
The team immediately started the donation process.
The donation went perfect. He did very, very good. Very appreciative of him doing what he did.
It took more than 5 different agencies to make sure it all went down, and they did it. Through the storm, life-saving stem cells were transferred to a little girl in desperate need.
Rodolfo is certainly the hero in this story, but there were dozens of people that helped him and were also heroes.
When they tell you, hey, you might be able to help someone and save someone, and when they told me that she was so young, it's like, yeah, I have to do this.
Teamwork really did make the dream work. And just 200 miles away, a different team was working to save an historic Texas landmark. The Hill County Courthouse in Hillsborough, Texas, has been a fixture in this small community since its construction in 1890. Today, it's not only a working courthouse, but a time capsule of local history. Some of these rare, one-of-a-kind documents date back to the 1800s. But when the massive winter storm hit in February of 2021, no one had any idea the amount of damage that the storm would do to this historic building.
All of a sudden, the freeze started happening, and then we started, thinking, wow, this is really not going to go away. The freeze was just tremendous. It just wasn't stopping. It just kept on and on.
In the midst of the stretch of sub-freezing temperatures, a court official was sent a video via text showing insane water pouring out of the second-floor windows of the courthouse. When he got there, he found water racing through the halls and down the stairways like a waterfall. He quickly discovered the reason why.
There was a sprinkler system up in the attic, and it bursted, and then the water was just gallons and gallons of water just started coming down from the attic to all of the floors, and then also in the basement.
The court official found the shutoff valve for the sprinkler pipes and turned off the water source. While they were able to get the water shut off, the building was flooded, and they had a major cleanup on their hands. The question now? How to get the water out of the building before more damage was done. Officials from the courthouse called our sponsor, damage and restoration specialists, Belfour. They arrived later that night. When they showed up, volunteers from across town had already jumped in to help.
We walked through and there was people everywhere. They were squeezing the floor. They were trying to get the water out from all floors.
They boxed up all those soaking documents and took them to their facility where they could be dried, cleaned, and salvaged. Meanwhile, the team began repairing the water damage to the building itself. While the courthouse is still under restoration, because of so many, it is back up and running.
You just would not believe all the people that were here when we showed up on site to help this courthouse. They are just really great people, kind people, caring people.
Coming up, a flash flood turns a county road into a raging river.
There was water everywhere, and as soon as I seen it, it pulled the entire vehicle in.
When it comes to flash flooding, you'll often hear the road turned into a river. Granted, anywhere we pave is like a riverbed for water, but it can take an everyday drive and turn it into a harrowing ordeal.
When this happened to one Tennessee family, it took a team of specially trained heroes to come to the rescue.
Jackson County is located in a picturesque part of Tennessee, surrounded by rolling hills, meandering rivers, and beautiful state parks. Here, you'll find rustic communities like Gainsboro.
It's a small town. You walk down the street, you get waved at. You drive down the road, you get waved at. Everybody just kind of knows everybody and gets along that way.
Like many rural areas, Jackson County has an all-volunteer fire and rescue team. Still, these local heroes see plenty of action. Cameron Hawkins is a member of the Jackson County Rescue Squad.
We've got Cummins Falls State Park, which has 5,000 people in and out of there a day. We have several rope rescues there a year. We do water rescue, cave rescue, all sorts of that stuff.
These kinds of rescues are both difficult and dangerous, and they require specialized training.
I'm advanced in swift water rescue, advanced extrication, certified in some technical mountain rescue.
Their specialized training would be put to good use one evening in February of 2021.
We'd had a little bit of rain, nothing too severe, and then at the end of the day, it started coming down a lot harder. Several of us, I know, had kind of texted each other saying, hey, just be on alert, we may get a call.
Amanda Hudson lives next to the aptly named Roaring River and knows very well the risk for flooding.
The Roaring River creates such a high flood area because it runs into the creeks, and then there's the mountain runoff as well.
On the afternoon of the flood, Amanda was driving to pick up her 11-year-old niece, Anicia.
Even when I left the house to run up the road, it still wasn't raining very much, not heavy.
People living in these high-risk flood areas need to always be aware that the conditions could change in a matter of minutes.
It was on my way back from the gas station. It was dark out, it was hard to see the road, and it was really pouring down.
And that specific evening, we had received 7 inches of rain in just a matter of 2 hours, and it just had nowhere to go. We started receiving several calls. People here in town were flooding.
Distress calls started pouring in. Amanda was able to make it back home, but she was not out of danger.
As soon as we go to pull into the driveway, that's when there was water everywhere. And it was so dark and the headlights wasn't good, so I didn't see it. But as soon as I seen it, it pulled the entire vehicle in.
The only thing Amanda could do to stop her car from being swept away was to keep her foot on the brake. But the water was rising quickly.
It was scary. It was scary. I was more panicked, like what to do, but at the same time, like, okay, how am I gonna stay calm enough to keep my niece from freaking out?
To make matters worse, Amanda realized she did not have her phone with her. Amanda tried in vain to get the attention of her husband, who was in the house.
I tried to lay on my horn, but at this time, my vehicle is submerged in water. So I look around, I was like, okay, what am I gonna do?
Coming up, with the floodwaters rising, there was no way for Amanda and her niece to escape.
That was the most scariest situation I had ever been in my entire life.
But first, here's another safety tip.
Many times after an evacuation, people are tempted and want to return home as soon as possible. But you should never go back until local authorities say it's safe.
Standing floodwaters are risky, even after the storm passes. Dangers include electrical shock, contamination, and other hidden dangers under the water. Never travel back into flooded zones until given clear instructions.
Remember that, especially after a natural disaster. There are many hidden dangers, and staying safe is always the #1 priority.
On a winter evening in February 2021, a flash flood hit Jackson County, Tennessee. Amanda Hudson and her 11-year-old niece found themselves trapped inside their car. Floodwater began rising around them.
The bottom of my driveway is more like a dry creek bed, but this night it was like a full-on river.
Amanda knew they were in danger. Their car could be swept into the raging river.
When I let off the brake, the vehicle started to slide, so I knew I had to keep my foot on the brake the entire time.
Just then, Amanda saw her neighbor.
So I stand out the window with my foot still on the brake as much as possible, and I'm cross motioning him, come on, I need help. And so he stood there and he was able to get in contact with the rescue department to come and help me out.
We were dispatched to a motor vehicle accident, vehicle in the water with 2 occupants trapped.
So as we approached the scene, we saw that the vehicle was at a slight tilted down angle. Water was already up to the top of the door handles, and when you've got water that high and rushing at a high pressure, it can take a grown man off their feet.
I was submerged in water to the waist. At that point, the whole time we were sitting there just shaking, we were cold. It was the most scariest situation I had ever been in my entire life.
In these kinds of swift water rescues, first responders need to be cautious of the many dangers they themselves face.
We don't know about any underwater barriers you may be dealing with. You could have fence posts, logs, other debris that potentially could be a hang-up for yourself.
The rescue team suited up in wetsuits and fins and devised a course of action.
The initial plan was to do, it's called a tension diagonal. We had a swimmer take a line across and tie it to a tree. And then the rescuers, we clipped in to the line with a carabiner on our swift-water vests and waded out into the water.
I was set up downstream, so if my fellow rescuer or Amanda or her niece got pulled underwater and pop up on the downstream side of the vehicle, then I'm their last line of defense before they're washed far downstream.
Rescuer Cameron Hawkins carefully made his way out to Amanda and her niece.
As soon as they showed up, the first thing they did was they talked to me, made sure I was calm, made sure my niece was okay, and he walked me through, don't panic, I'm gonna put the life jacket on you. He pulled my niece out the window first.
Another rescuer strapped Anicia to the line and guided her to safety.
Once we got her back on dry ground, she was just shivering, cold obviously. EMS immediately wrapped her up in a towel, took her to their ambulance.
With Anicia safely on the other side, Cameron got Amanda out of the car.
I was able to actually pry the door open and get access to her better. I was able to get her strapped in and clipped to me, and we started our way towards the bank.
When I got safely to dry ground, I was still all shook up. I was shaking the whole time. I was just so grateful. Without the rescue squad, I don't know what kind of situation we would be in now.
Obviously a sense of relief at that point because everyone made it out alive and no injuries, and things calmed down after that point, and then everybody's just standing in the cold rain, wet, but happy.
Months later, Amanda visited Cameron at the Jackson County Rescue Squad station.
I mean, the water was moving really fast. I don't know if you could tell from inside.
Yeah, it was scary. It was scary as watching the water level rise above the vehicle and everything. Yeah. My whole bottom half was completely covered in water. Yeah. I know when you got to the door, you said something along the lines of, fancy meeting you out here. Yeah. I remember that even in a tough situation, you made it seem a little less stressful.
We're supposed to kind of stay calm and try to make light of the situation, and that's what I was trying to do. So, but I'm glad that helped.
Yeah, it sure did.
You were super calm. You helped us a ton. You made it a whole lot easier on us, for sure. And I was just glad to help.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
They're amazing. I don't know what I would have done without them. Just having them there, knowing I was gonna be okay, that makes all the difference. They're real heroes.
being in any of these types of emergencies can obviously be frightening, but there are things that you can do to prepare.
Stay calm, call for help, and know there will be a trained responder there to help you.
Thanks so much for watching Hearts of Heroes. We'll see you next time.